Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar interview. I'm Francis Seeley, yet again, from Enfield Voices and GlobalNet 21. And as you know, we do these interviews regularly with people who are making a difference in either a local community, nationally, or even internationally. And today we're looking at local action. And we're doing something rather different to some of the interviews we've done before. We're actually going to look at interfaith dialogue and social action. And to do that, we're interviewing Mark Meacher, who is a minister, and he'll tell us about that later. And he'll tell us how he is getting other churches involved and other faiths involved in both dialogue and action. So if you are watching this and you have any questions, please type it in the chat box on the webinar system or below the live feed in the Facebook sharing that we're doing on various groups. Anyhow, Mark, thank you very much for joining us today and taking part in this. And first of all, can I ask you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Certainly, Francis. It's lovely to be with you. And I am a United Reformed Church minister who moved, I suppose, fairly recently to Enfield. Myself and my wife, we're both United Reformed Church ministers, and we moved last July to become the two United Reformed Church ministers for a total of 6 churches in Enfield. The 3 that I have responsibility for are on Chase Side, Lancaster Road and Bushell Park. My wife has responsibility for Palmer's Green, Winchmore Hill and Ponders End. So I guess you can say that we've come in surrounding the whole town.
Okay, now, it's interesting what you're doing, because in my younger days, my teen days anyhow, I mean, church ministers and vicars usually were self-contained in their church and they didn't get involved across even Christian different denominations, let alone interfaith work. But you're now beginning to do that, and many others are beginning to do that. What has made you interested in interfaith work and social action?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, what's made you interested in interfaith work and social action?
I think for me, it's about how I have read the Bible over the years and how my own faith has developed. And I have found more and more as the years have gone by that I felt drawn to actually. It's not about necessarily having to believe specific things, but actually more about following in the footsteps of Jesus, that actually we should be doing and acting the way that Jesus did and acted. And that involves loving everybody, even as far as loving your enemy, which is not easy at all. And so from my reading of the New Testament in particular, but also reading through some of the Old Testament texts, it sort of has prompted me to sort of get involved. And other things, around us have happened in the world. So, when the Syrian refugee crisis first struck a few years ago now, how anybody could not be moved by seeing a picture of that boy on the beach, I don't know. And yet, although the government has promised various things, which it hasn't then done, although people have sort of responded in some way, we still need to keep on responding. And at the end of the day, in terms of interfaith and dealing with people of no faith, we share humanity with every other person on the planet. We are the same.
But, over the years, if you go back 60 years, you're living in a very different environment than the one that existed then. Christian church then was dominant, particularly the Church of England. And since then, we've become a much more secular society where there are a lot of non-believers.
Yes.
And also we've got other faiths coming in, Islam and Hinduism, and a massive growth in spiritualism as well.
Yes.
Now, how do you react to that new environment, being in one religion amongst many, and none as well?
I I think it can be difficult, and I think it is hard for some people to cope. We quite often hear people talking about that. This is a Christian country, and we shouldn't be accepting people from other faiths, or we shouldn't be opening the doors to a swarm of refugees and things like that. But my reading of the Bible says that we should be accepting people. We should be loving everybody, even if they are different and they believe different things. I think that we haven't been a Christian country as such for a long time. Actually, I think we've partly been deluding ourselves that we are a Christian country, and I think we're actually have been very secular or very low on faith in organized religion for a significant period of time. I do think, however, that there is a lot of spirituality within people. And I think there is a hunger for something that is real in the spiritual realm. Now, for some people, that manifests itself in going into organized religion and becoming Muslim, becoming Hindu, or whatever it might be. For other people, it takes a different route. And I know people that are humanists. I know people that are Buddhists. I know people that are all sorts of things. And I think I had a valuable experience a couple of years ago of actually working in a hospice environment. And in that environment, for me, it was this key about spirituality in particular, that spirituality meaning the core essence of a person. And so quite often the conversations that I would have with people who either they were at their end, coming close to the end of their life, or had family members who were coming close to the end of their life, was about this search for the real them, what it was that was of value in their life, what it was that was of importance, and finding those things that we shared, even though we might not have the same belief system.
So, I mean, in a way, do you see yourself as being on the vanguard of mainstream Christianity? Because mainstream Christianity has suffered a real decline. Many of the churches are emptying, but lots of the out-of-the-box type of Christianity, the house meetings and so on, Pentecostal religion and so on, is expanding. So do you see a mission to try and reinvigorate mainstream Christianity?
Definitely. I mean, one of the things that I quite often say, and one of the things that we said to the churches here in Enfield when they invited Melanie and myself to become their ministers, was that we quite often find that we have more conversations about what the gospel's about what Christianity is about what's real in life, when we are out and about in the community rather than actually in the churches. We do need to be, as churches, we do need to be out, not enclosed. For a long period, the church has been there and expected people to come to it. Unfortunately, at some times, we haven't done a very good job of welcoming people when they come into churches. So one of the things that I've quite often tried to do wherever I've been is just to try and open the doors of the church. And try and say to people, actually, this isn't a scary space, and you will be welcome and accepted here. But that is a difficult message to get across. I think a lot of people around us have this image of church as being something that was what it was 30 years ago or whatever, or what it was like when they were in school and they were forced to attend school assemblies and have that joy of the local vicar coming in and sadly a lot of the time boring them to death, to be quite honest. So one of the things that I'm very keen on doing is actually trying to be open, trying to talk to people where they are and explore with them, what their life is about, what's important to them. And we usually find that, particularly, must confess to visiting local hostelries occasionally. And you find that if you go in, and quite often both my wife and I are wearing our collars, which clearly identifies us as Christian, but we end up having all sorts of conversations, and people are willing to talk and share all sorts of things with you.
Okay, so those are some of the things you're doing, and actually, I'd love to go in with the camera into a local pub when you enter and see what happens. But you're doing other things. Let's talk about them. I mean, you're trying to get people together. You're trying to get people to think differently. You're trying to increase an awareness of our common humanity. One way you're trying to do this is you're having an exhibition, aren't you, very soon in Holy Week called Imago Dei, the image of God. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, during Holy Week from 15th to the 20th of April, the church on Chayside, Christ Church United Reformed Church, we're actually putting on an exhibition which we called Imago Dei, which means in the image of God. And during that week, we have got a combination of things going on. We've actually got a couple of the local schools involved. So we've talked to them about what is the image of God, and Bush Hill Park Primary School, for example, have taken that and said, well, they wanted to look at the idea of forgiveness. So they have given up, got one of their classes to do some pictures of what that might mean. So we've got those which will be on display. We've got an exhibition of pictures of effectively the 12 stations of the cross, but photographs of refugees in various poses related to stations of the cross, which is obviously leading up to the cross in Holy Week. We have got an exhibition by Christian Aid, which is called Uprooted, which focuses on international displacement, focusing on Iraq, Kenya, and Nigeria. We've got a local poet, Mary Duggan, and a group of other local poets who are going to come and do some workshops more aimed at children, but also adults on the Wednesday of that week from 11 o'clock, and on the Saturday. On the Saturday afternoon as well, at 2 o'clock, we've got about 13 local poets going to come in and do some poetry reading. We've got a local photographer, Debbie J, who has gone around and taken photographs of all the churches. And so she's going to have a photographic exhibition. I keep finding that I've got other things that are coming in.
So, is this festival, this exhibition, exclusively Christian, or have you, for example, been in contact with some of the local mosques?
We haven't made contact with the local mosques, but interestingly, some of the children from the schools have put in Muslim pictures, issues, or stories, or what have you, into their pictures, which is really good. But we've also got pictures by Elizabeth Gray King, which the refugee pictures and images in themselves begin to challenge our thinking. But we've also got pictures by Elizabeth Gray King, one called Earth Mother, which accentuates the feminine in terms of the Godhead. And what I've been trying to do with this exhibition is try and say to people, on two sides. One is, what do we perceive God to be, in inverted commas? What is God like? And on the other side of the coin is, how do we as humans reflect God? What can we see in each other that might show us something of God?
And if it talks about God in that way, is there anything in it for a humanist?
I would hope that they would find something of interest when they come in. I'm not sure what they might find, but I would hope that they would find that from some of the images of humanity, that they would find that to be of interest to them. But equally, I would want to challenge them and say, look, from where I stand, I believe that there is a God. I understand that you might not agree with me, but come and just share with me, talk to me about what you think, because I'm interested in listening to that conversation and having that conversation with you.
So you would have a soapbox there.
I don't like calling it a soapbox. I like having conversations with people. I like having discussions with people. I mean, the other night I had a lovely conversation with a chap who said, "I'm a communist. I've been a communist for over 20 years, so I don't believe in God. But I do think that we need to work together to make this world a better place." And that's the sort of agenda that I feel that I'm on. One of the other things that I'm involved in is that I'm working with a group in terms of trying to protest against the arms fair that's going to be happening at the Excel Centre in September in London. And I joined the protest 2 years ago, and this year we're trying to up that protest, because that's a thing that's affecting common humanity. The fact that we in the UK are selling weapons of war to countries that are then bombing innocent civilians, and we don't seem to bat an eyelid about it. So there's a group where we're working with people of other faiths and people of no faith to actually be there in the beginning of September and stand outside and protest and say, look, this is wrong. This is not what we should be doing as a country.
Okay, let's come to the social action bit in a minute, because I think it's really interesting. But I mean, in the festival, I mean, for what you're saying and the people you want to have involved, you're trying to look at the common humanity that exists between everyone, whatever their faith or no faith at all, and see what understanding can be achieved.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just for example, the poets that are going to come and read their poetry on the Saturday, I'm not vetting their poetry. Mary Duggan, who's kindly organising it for me, has had a look, and she said, "Oh, I'm not quite sure whether or not we could, say that in church." And I'm not sure I worry too much about those sort of things. I have had people make comments to me before about swearing in church, but it's something that sometimes actually, the way in which the world is for humanity, in some ways, the response can only be an expletive. And if that's the response, I personally don't have a problem with that. I know some of my church members may do, but I don't. And I think we need to be very, very real with one another in terms of how we explore where we are as the human race and where we are helping and where we aren't helping.
Yeah, I'm sure some believers would say Jesus swore when he was in the temple. So who knows? Because he was pretty angry then. But just remind us again, where is it and what time?
It's at Christ Church United Reformed Church on Chase Side, and it's free. There's no charge. There's refreshments provided as well, so you can come in, sit there and have a cup of coffee, wander at your leisure around the building, and it's from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday of Holy Week. On the Friday, because there is a joint act of worship in the centre of Enfield town at 10:30 that morning, the exhibition will be open from 1 o'clock till 4 o'clock. And again on the Saturday will be open from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And if you like, the activities for children in particular is 11 to 1 on the Wednesday, 11 to 1 on the Saturday. But I do believe that one of my church leaders is organising some sort of Easter egg hunt as well during the week. So there may be other things if they come in at other times that they might find of interest.
Okay, so it sounds a really interesting day, but I mean, is this a sort of thing that happens and then you forget it, or do you have any idea that it should have outcomes that you can follow up on?
My desire for mounting it and us as a church trying to put this on is essentially to open the doors of the church, because as with a lot of our churches now, they tend to be closed, and I think we need to open the doors of our churches more. And in part, that's about actually, in this particular case, Christ Church is a Grade 2 listed building, and there aren't too many people that have actually ever been in there. Every time somebody does wander in, they express a delight at the beauty of the building. It's a very historic building. It's got some lovely stained glass windows. It's got a copy of Da Vinci's The Last Supper. at the front of the church. And so it's about opening the church doors and letting people come in. My follow-up to that is that actually it's trying to say to people, you don't have to be frightened of coming into a church. It's a safe place. And that message in itself is one that I think we need to think about and how we get that over again. Other things.
Yeah, but do you also see a possible outcome? Because you're getting groups together, you've got various groups coming in. Do you see this as being an embryonic form of a further interfaith discussion, and even something like a civil society forum? I know your wife Melanie is very interested in civil society. Do you see that sort of outcome eventually, coming out of what you're doing as well?
I certainly see it as very much start engaging with the local community and developing those community links, and that's something that we've worked on already since we've been here. It's something that where we were before in Southend we worked on particularly well. And again, as I've already mentioned, when the Syrian refugee crisis first came about, one of the things that we were able to do there was, because we had, if you like, a larger building, we were able to draw together groups from the community. And one of the things we did very much in the early days was we got together all those groups that were working in various ways to help the Syrian refugees together in one building at one time. And we gave them all 5 minutes just to say what they were doing. And that was an opportunity for other people to then say, oh, actually, you're doing a similar sort of thing to me. Can we get together and do something together and be more effective? So one of my aims is, yes, to try and build that community cohesion, which is all the community, not just the Christian community, but the interfaith community as well, and people of no faith as well, coming together to work for the good of the community. Because at the end of the day, we want Enfield to be a place that is a delight for everybody to live in, not just those that are privileged few.
But at this time where there's so much division in society, Brexit is one of those, but it underlines the great divisions that have existed before people even knew what the word Brexit was.
Yes.
It is really important to create that cohesion now, isn't it? The way that you're talking about. And do you think you can take a lead in doing that without people thinking, you're trying to get something out of it, you've got another agenda?
I think other people do often think that the church has another agenda. And at the end of the day, I must say that I would love more people to come and worship in the churches that I'm serving. I would be delighted if they did. But I have been particularly inspired in my approach by our Melanie and mine experiences of going to India over a period of 3 or 4 years now, where we have been out to see projects that the Church of North India is working on. And the Church of North India is a church that was 5 or 6 different denominations that actually joined together. So if you like, our church out there, plus the Church of England, plus the Methodist Church, came together to form one church. But they are very active in North India, wherever they start a church, their instant focus then is to set up some sort of health centre or clinic or a school or something else like that. So their focus is on serving the community, and their approach is that they provide those facilities free of charge to those that are in the community, and they're not ashamed of the fact they are Christian, and they would love people to become Christians, but they say, this is for you, we want to serve you, and that is the first priority. If somebody then does become a Christian, of course they celebrate it, and they are delighted that they do. But the first focus is on that serving the local community, and that has something that has particularly inspired me over the last couple of years. It felt when I first went over there 4 years ago now, that I had travelled halfway around the world to find the church doing what I felt the church really should be doing.
And a part of what they should be doing, and you're beginning to do it, is social action. You talked about the Syrian refugees, you talked about the arms trade and the protests there. How important is it to, get people to go to church and other people to understand that they should be involved in changing our society, social action. And church is not about worship, it's also about witnessing as well.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important that we do get out there and witness. I think one of the things that I struggle with at the moment is that there does feel like there are so many things that need changing. You know, you look at the situation where we have a country where there are millions of people using food banks. You look at the situation where there is many people in debt, and that's one of the things that we are sort of looking at already, working on with in Enfield, is possibility of setting up a debt advice centre for people. Where do you stop? That, you know, we still have the refugee issue, which hasn't gone away and seemed to only have become an issue as soon as refugees hit the European continent, where we have people. You know, we have, I think it's Lebanon at the moment is the country with the highest number of refugees in it in the world, and that is such a small country, but has miles more than anything else. And similarly, in Africa, there's another country in Africa which has millions of refugees and displaced persons in it. So, you know, I think my struggle is how can you actually combat all of these different things which need attention in their own right? The only way we can do that is if we can encourage other people to get involved in that mission and that role. And at the end of the day, hopefully we will, between us, make the world to be a better place for living.
Now, I mean, you're a minister, but
Yeah.
what do you think is the art of getting the believer and the non-believer to work together in terms of social action?
I think that is really about that believer. For me, it is about just finding Jesus Christ for yourself. And then once you have started to read and learn and understand, if you are growing in your faith, I don't think you can do anything other than respond and start getting involved in the community. Because if you start looking at things like love your neighbour as yourself, if you start looking at things like Matthew 25, where Jesus at the end of time has the sheep and the goats, puts one on one side and one on the other, and says that, you know, when you've seen me naked and you've looked after me, when you've seen me without food and you've fed me, and those sort of things, you can't fail to start wanting to be involved in trying to help in your local community in some way. It's one of the things that one of the churches that we serve does already, in that I think it's the last one next week, but over the winter period, they operate a night shelter for homeless people. That's getting involved, and we have to be there and we have to get involved.
But you do that. I mean, I know the church has done quite a lot on food banks, and the Southgate Church has certainly done that. Christchurch, but so does the mosque in Palmer's Green.
Yeah.
The mosque. So I mean, have you tried to get together with them as well to talk about social action? I mean, it's unfair to ask you this because you're just beginning and you're just starting, doing a fantastic lot of things, and I'm really throwing these things at you. But I mean, that's something you'd like to do, get them together so that you work across lines on a common interest.
We haven't done yet. I mean, one of the things that we obviously it is fairly early days, so we're only beginning to build up those networks. And try and link up with people. So one of the things that Melanie did after the horrendous attack in Christchurch week before last, no, 3 weeks ago now, I think it was to actually write to two of the local mosques and say, you know, we're thinking of you and we'd love to get together with you. So it's one of those things that's on our agenda, and we will get involved with as and when we can and as and when we're able to. It's building up those links, and it takes a little bit of time. What we've generally found where we've been before is that it probably takes up to 3 years in a new place before those links are established to such a degree that, you know, you can do more things together. So it takes a little bit of time, but it's on our agenda.
So you're doing it in a step-by-step approach, which is a wise way of doing it. So if anyone's interested and wants to know more about your work, your exhibition, your social action and so on, how would they do that? How would they get in touch with you?
I'm quite happy for anybody to contact me via Facebook, or if any of the church websites have got an email address for me, I'm quite happy to stick it on something after we've finished this broadcast, so that people could email me and contact me, and feel free to get in touch.
Okay, and they can find your email where?
On the church websites. And there's also, I'm trying to think where else there is, but I'll put it on the Enfield Voices link after we've broadcast, if you like.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've sort of come to the end of our 30 minutes, so we've covered quite a lot of territory. So thanks for doing it. And it's really impressive that you're starting and you're sort of developing activities in the way that you are to take the church out, to cut across boundaries, to involve people in things that aren't necessarily, doctrinaire things, but which are about, making a better humanity for us all. So, thank you for doing this, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime in the future.
That'll be very good. And before I go, can I just mention the other thing I've forgotten to say is that we do have a singer, songwriter coming in May as well to Christchurch, a guy by the name of Garth Hewitt, who works for the Amos Trust. And they are an organisation that work in 4 specific areas around the world: Israel, Palestine, which may be of interest to some, Nicaragua, the Dalits in India, and also with a thing called the Street Kids World Cup, which you may or may not have heard about. But he's coming to do an evening concert on the 18th of May. If anybody wants to come to that, again, details are on our Facebook page. Okay, I was going to ask you about Garth Hewitt, but we got so involved in other things. I know. It sort of passed me by. Anyhow, thanks again for doing this, and we'll sort of end this interview now. Thank you.